So the title of my talk is Towards a Brighter Future with a question mark. How technology is impacting our society. So first of all, a little bit more about me. My research focuses on how the brain responds to technology in a variety of contexts. So I study how the brain processes cybersecurity messages. I study how the brain affects virtual collaboration between teams, and how we process true and false information online, and the certain biases and cognitive biases that we bring into play. So my undergraduate degree was actually at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee in the US, and my undergraduate degree is actually in neuroscience, not in business. After I got my undergraduate degree, I went and got an MBA with a concentration in finance, and then I moved on to information systems. So I brought that together in my research and my teaching to understand how we all are affected by technology. So that's a picture of me from several years ago. That's me with what's called an FNIRS cap on. That cap uses infrared light to measure the blood flow in the brain. And so when you pair that up with how somebody's using a technology, you may be able to see some of the benefits of using the technology or the drawbacks of using that technology. We use other cognitive neuroscience tools in our discipline. So that's an MRI scanner, so we can put somebody into an MRI scanner and see how they react to technology as well, see how their brain responds. That's an emotive EEG system, so that's a cap that goes on your head that can measure the electrical activity produced by your brain. And then many of you have probably seen in some way, shape, or form the use of eye tracking. So either through Google Glass or other types of things like that can track where your eyes are in relation to things. So these are the types of things I use in my research and others use in my area of the field to better understand how we individually respond to technology, and then we draw conclusions on how that might affect the overall society. So first of all, let me be very clear that technology has done a lot of great things for society. I for one, would not be here without technology connecting us more and allowing us to have a program like Benva that is a great program to come and teach in and talk about digital transformation in Vietnam. So obviously technology has done a lot of good for society. So if this survey up here, this shows that a survey of people in industry who say that email, for example, is important to their work or vital to their daily work. 61% of people say that. The internet, 54% of people say that is a vital part of what they do. Landline phones, about 35%. Cellular smartphones, that's gone up a lot. 24% here. And then social media and networking sites to promote businesses. So obviously, technology adds a lot of good for what we do in our daily work. The other thing is, over the last 4 decades, workforce productivity has increased 84%. And most of that has been, in part, due to the advancements of digital technology in the workplace. So again, another reason why the adoption of technology and the integration of it into the business life and into our society has created a lot of good things. Now this has happened, like that says, over 4 decades. The position that I take on this is that we've looked at a lot of what technology does that's good for society and good for business, but at this point, we also should take some steps back and think about some of the ways that technology has been not so good, how it's caused disruption, how it's caused some problems within our society and the way we relate to each other. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. That's what my research somewhat focuses on, and it's an important topic to discuss. So I don't know if anybody here has experienced this, but the amount of emails we get throughout the day. We can become overloaded by them. We can We can have way too many to respond to. All of them are having, or most of them might require a response or some additional work time. When you're getting hundreds of emails a day, it can be very hard to process any of the information that's in them because you're just overwhelmed by it. My time teaching, research, and everything else, I can't spend 8 hours a day on email, even though some people might want me to. So email overload technology has increased what we call workplace burnout. And the World Health Organization recently defined workplace burnout as a syndrome that is affecting a lot of people in society. So having too much information and having to do too much with technology leads to feelings of cynicism and being exhausted by the work process throughout the day. Other things that have been done to try to combat or fix things like email overload are the introduction of digital assistants like Alexa or Siri or all these other emergent technologies that try to refine and give us the information that we need when they think we need it. So the key there is they are selecting information for us based on what this algorithm thinks is important for us to process. So we're not using our judgment and seeking out the information that's important anymore. We're trusting a digital space to create and pull out what's important for us to understand and to read. And so these things can make mistakes, and that's important to keep in mind. Okay, that picture's a joke. Social media, this is a quote, social media from Facebook to Twitter have made us more densely networked than ever before. Yet for all this connectivity, new research suggests that we have never been lonelier or more narcissistic, and that loneliness is making us mentally and physically ill. So social media, where we can be connected with people that we haven't been connected to in a long time, there's me and one of my colleagues at University of Hawaii and a number of other researchers around the world are starting to look at what we call the dark side of IT, kind of like a Star Wars reference there. So the dark side of IT, how social media could be causing some problems for us in the way that we interact with each other. And Stephen March in this article takes a position based on research of this. The other aspect of this, and this is very common in the US, and I would assume that it's common in some way, shape, or form here. Which of these two pictures do we think the people are having more fun? The bottom right. Okay, yeah. And the top left, you can see they're disconnected, they're withdrawn from each other, and they're looking at their phones. So there's something unique about the human experience that we really desire the type of connection on the bottom right, being in the same room with people, interacting with them, and really enjoying other people's immediate company. Facebook and Twitter and everything can provide some of that, but it does not provide every single aspect of that interaction there. And the people on the left, up at the top, are using this chance that they have to have a connection to be somewhere else. They're looking at their phone, thinking about things that are maybe hundreds or thousands of miles away. And this is in the US, this is a very, very common occurrence to walk into a restaurant and see people that are out to dinner, spending money to be together out to dinner, and not interacting, just completely being on their phones the entire time. And I mean, I've been guilty of that too at times. So I'm not saying that I'm always the bottom right, but that's what brings a lot of joy to us is interacting with each other on a personal level. The other aspect of some of the things that social media has created for us is the reduction of some of the social interactions that were small social interactions that still connected us with other people. So the selfie stick, for example, it kind of got cut off there at the top, but the selfie stick became very popular a few years ago, and it's very convenient and nice to use. But one of the things that we did before the selfie stick is that we would have a small personal interaction with somebody where we'd ask them to take our picture, and they would agree, and they might take a few pictures and say, I hope I got one that looks good. And it was a nice small social interaction, and those small social interactions are important in maintaining a healthy society and healthy relationships with each other. So the other aspect of this, these 4 people are together on a vacation, it looks like, and they're focused on taking a picture of themselves to maybe post to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all of these different social media apps, so their friends can see what they're doing thousands of miles away. And so one of the things that also means is that they're not currently in that space. They're thinking about things far away. So instead of being in this current space where 4 of them are having fun abroad, they're thinking about the picture that they're taking that's going to be on Instagram, and maybe how many likes they might get on Facebook later from that picture. Okay. And then as we become more and more attached to technology, you see certain things, technology addiction, but also like people showing affection towards the technology, more so than even sometimes each other. So people will display like, oh, I love my computer, or oh, my phone is my life, I need my phone. So that's also an interesting thing to think about. Why we are now choosing technology over human interaction. One of the main issues with introducing technology into society on a large scale and having this disconnection that happens as a result when people start interacting only through technology is that as of yet, technology does not provide the opportunity for human touch. And from psychology, we know that human touch is a very, very important emotion, or a very important sensation and expression of human interaction, human connectedness. So this quote from Psychology Today, maybe that's because there are times during intense grief or fear, but also in ecstatic moments of joy or love, when only the language of touch can fully express what we feel. And if you think about some of the most intense happy and sad moments in your life, sometimes that's what you needed. You need somebody there to share the joy with, or to share your grief. And so these are one of the key things that technology can also take away from us. Okay, so enough of a discussion of some of the higher level things. I'll talk a little bit about the important things that I've done with my research in trying to understand how the brain responds to these things. First of all, let me just set up with, there are 2 ways that the mind works. It's called dual processing of cognition. And one of them is mostly subconscious. It's not quite like the old theory of subconscious cognition, but it's similar. It's automatic. It happens very quickly. So the brain processes things in system 1 cognition. It processes it very, very quickly and without much thought. So if you think of things like your drive to work, or things that you do every single day, you're not thinking about every single interaction that's happening. It's kind of, you're in automatic mode or automatic pilot on it. And so that's one way of thinking. And scientists believe that system 1, we spend about 50 to 70% of our time automatically processing things without thinking much about them. So over half of our time. System 2 is that deliberative cognitive thought that we think of when we think about thinking about stuff or thinking about things deeply. System 2 cognition, it's very effortful. It takes time. It's like reading and integrating and thinking about different things, studying for a class or having an intense conversation with another individual. So that's the more effortful cognition that creates, that's harder to do, and so we try to avoid it as much as possible. So our minds have very strong dispositions to try to push as much of what we do in our daily lives down to that automatic behavior, the automatic and fast processing of information. And the reason that's important, this is a picture of Times Square, is that when you look at something like this, there's so much information to process. There's so many different things we can be looking at. There's so many different things that catch your eyes. So with that comes about information overload. All right, and information overload means that there's just too much information to process, and as a result of becoming overloaded with information, our brains automatically go to heuristics or streamlined processing where we think less. And when we think less about things, what happens is we make more biased decisions. So we refer to automatic or cognitive biases, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second. So in society today, I think we can all think about situations where there's just way too much information to process. We can't possibly get through all of the information that we need to process. And as a result, we have to simplify in some way. The other piece is a bias that I've worked a lot on in research called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to believe, to process information and believe what you already believe in the face of contradictory evidence. So continuing to believe one thing is true even if you've been given information that openly contradicts that, and you want to believe what you already believe anyway. So basically this picture sums it up. There's a bunch of no's, but your mind is seeing a yes, because that's what you believe should be there. Okay. All right, and so this is some of the neuroscience findings from a study that we did in 2014. Don't worry, you don't have to understand this. I will take you through it very quickly. So we were the first team to show the neurological correlations of confirmation bias. This is a tendency to process information that we believe in already, regardless of information that contradicts it. So these 5 panels up at the top, they're all different types of information that we showed participants in the study, and we measured their brain reaction to them. Okay, and so those 5 pieces of information, it was factual information that supported what they thought when they were going through the study. There was factual information that challenged what they thought when they were going through the study. There was opinion-based information that both supported and challenged what they thought as they went through the study. And then this last one is just completely irrelevant information. And so the region in the brain we're talking about here is highly, one of its core functions is decision making. So one of the core things this area of the brain is doing is decision making. So I'm just going to ask you which one of these 5 panels looks different than the other. The first one, this one over here, all the blue there, that's more cognitive activity that's going on in the decision-making region of the brain. And what that means is that all of this information was processed the same as irrelevant information. So factual information that challenged what you thought was disregarded, processed as irrelevant. The only information that was processed in the decision-making region of the brain was factual information that supported what you thought when you went into the room. Okay, and this was in a virtual team interaction where they were discussing many different types of information trying to come to a good decision. So there was about 30 years of research relating to this problem that face-to-face teams that meet and discuss information, they often come to poor decisions. Technology came on the scene and created a situation where people shared a lot more information, so there was more information to process. But they came to decisions that were no better than face-to-face teams. So despite having access to more information, they came to know better decisions. So there were a number of things that people thought might be the case there, and a lot of research on it. What we found was it was a bias that was common in both face-to-face teams and virtual teams. They were only processing information that they wanted to believe and disregarding everything else. One of the questions that I would often get after this 2014 study, okay. So one of the things that I often got a question that I got when I talked about this 2014 study is what effect did information overload have to play on this? Were they having too much information and what happens there? So we did a follow-up study and we found that as the level of information that you have to process increases, this gets worse. So the more you revert to this type of bias and just only processing information you want to believe. And that has a number of implications. So number one, the amount of notifications that we're getting and amount of things that we have to process are huge now. To interrupt somebody 20 or 30 years ago, one of the things you would have to do in a business environment, one of the things you'd have to do to interrupt somebody is you could call them on the phone, you could walk over and knock on their door, their office door, maybe be able to send them a fax. Now think of all the ways you can contact the people you're connected with. You can still call, you can still go knock on the door, but you can send them a Facebook message, you can send them a Messenger message, you can send them a Snapchat, you can send them an email. And all of these different things on our computers are giving us notifications that somebody's trying to get a hold of us. Unless you turn them off, which I would recommend that you turn off the majority of notifications. And then you also have technology-based notifications like, oh, it's time to upgrade to Windows 10, a new version of Windows 10, or it's time to install updates on a number of things. So all of these things take time, and our brains have a limited capacity to process all of them. So we need to minimize the amount of things that we're trying to process so we don't revert to the biases that I was just talking about. So this is just lots of distractions in our daily lives, and we have to figure out a better way to manage these distractions. So one of the areas that I've gotten involved in is true and false information on social media. And so this is my research team with some people from Indiana University and me at University of Hawaii. This is an article we wrote for the London School of Economics blog. And we talked about the research that we did on social media that indicates that the confirmation bias is the main thing that comes into play when we are believing things that aren't true, that are fake, but we believe to be true. So that's what drives it, and we often propagate that information. Then there's also, so this doesn't just apply to, this research does not just apply to social media. It also applies to things that affect business. Fake reviews are something that Yelp and Google are dealing with right now. People that are just filling out fake reviews with false information. Amazon is also having to deal with fake reviews as well. And so lots of true and false information that we need to process online. And how do we do that if we're stuck in certain biases and certain ways of thinking that don't allow us to process information that contradicts what we think? One of the key things that I was quoted in NBC News as saying is when you have 320 million people in the US disagreeing on what reality actually is, what truth actually is, that's a lot more dangerous in terms of cybersecurity attacks than hacking into a high-profile organization. I actually use the State Department, I apologize. That's one of it, as my example there. But when you think of cybersecurity attacks in any business and any governmental organization, you think of these brute force attacks where people hack into a system and gain information from it. That certainly happens. But if you can disrupt the flow of information and get people to believe things that aren't true, that has a whole other effect. And so that's the emergent part of cybersecurity that I'm studying right now. Another article that I wrote for The Hill, the biggest cyber threat to our democracy is your news feed, indicating that the things that polarize us or pull us apart from what the real truth or the underlying truth is are dangerous. We need to believe on a common reality, or at least some portion of the common reality, before we get pulled too far away from it. Okay, so we did a few studies to help understand this better. So initially, after the true and false news on social media came out, there was a push by Facebook to put with the article a flag that said this has been disputed by third-party fact checkers. So we were very quick to get on the ground and actually study that. And what we found from a brain perspective is that this little warning right here just made people angry, and they still believe what they wanted to believe beforehand. So they would look at that third-party fact disputed by third-party fact checkers, and they think that was wrong, and what they were believing in maybe a fake article was correct. So that was not an effective way of dealing with it, and actually Facebook discontinued it, I think, last year, at the end of last year, maybe it was the middle of last year, but because it was ineffective. So we have to stop doing things that don't work. So flagging things with saying, you need to, this has been disputed, somebody else doesn't believe this, so therefore you shouldn't believe this. That doesn't work. One of the things that we're working on right now that's hopefully going to be coming out soon is having people rate some news articles based on credibility, or any information based on the credibility, makes them stop and think. Now remember that system 1, system 2, automatic versus deliberate cognition. The problem is that people are in too much of an automatic cognition state when they're going through social media and also reading reviews online sometimes. And what we need to do is kind of get people out of that and to think a little bit more. So we ran a study that rated the credibility of certain news articles. So we had people go through Facebook and say, okay, have them rated on 5 little metrics, and that got them to stop and think more deeply about the article that they were thinking about. Now, is it practical to expect people to rate every article that they encounter on Facebook? Absolutely not. But the really interesting thing about this study, from a cognitive perspective and what we were able to show with the neuroscience, is that once you have them rate a few of these, the mindset of thinking more deeply about each of the articles persists longer, even when they're not rating it. They're more skeptical, or they process information more deeply afterwards. So that was an important finding, and we're communicating that finding out now. Okay. So a lot of this is, we talked about the good that technology has brought, and we talked about some of the issues technology brings up. Well, what can we do about it? And one of the key things that I think we lost over the last 30 years or so with the introduction of technology is the sense of balance, the good and the bad, which is how I started the talk. So system 1 is this automatic or automaticity way of thinking about the world, or not thinking about the world, going through the world. I don't think it's an accident that there's been a push in the United States towards more mindful behavior. So there's courses called mindfulness-based stress reduction, and mindfulness in general has become a big topic in the United States. So moving more towards not fully just being mindful about everything, but getting more balance between the automatic things that we do and the mindful things that we do on purpose. The other thing is trying to limit the amount that we're getting pushed towards this distracted and kind of chaotic nature. So trying to be more attentive when we're around either other people or even interacting with technology, and pushing towards that attentive side of things a little bit more. So again, balance. You don't have to be attentive to everything because it's impossible, but allowing yourself, being aware that you can be distracted very easily with technology in today's environments, and trying to push yourself more towards the attentive side. And then the other thing that maybe we don't need more balance on, we just need to focus on, is that all of these things have led to more disconnection between people. So instead of being more connected with each other, we're connected with people millions or thousands of miles away, but we feel more disconnected. And part of the reason that is because we are social people. We are meant to have interactions with other human beings in the same space. And technology hasn't evolved to the point where it's rich enough in terms of the information it provides to provide every aspect of that human interaction that's important. So focusing more on making those connections and being mindful of talking to people in real time and having connections like that, or like coming to a talk like today. So that's important. The other thing, this research is working through the pipelines now that I've worked on. Views of nature help restore cognitive resources. So if you think of your desktop settings, a lot of people set them towards nature views. Might be a subconscious way that they've been dealing with it, because there's research that supports, it's called attention restoration theory. A walk in nature, even looking for 20 or 30 seconds on a desktop at a view of nature helps replenish your cognitive resources. So if you're feeling worn out in terms of I've paid too much attention to stuff, I'm tired, subtle things like just looking at nature for a little bit or having nature in the background on your computer can help combat that. And there's been a lot of research that has supported attention restoration theory. Okay. And then all of this is also related, I alluded to it earlier, but is also related to cybersecurity. So I wrote a paper last year with one of my colleagues, and we were honored to receive Best Paper in 2018 from an international journal on it. A lot of what we're doing in cybersecurity right now assumes that there are deliberate thinking that is going on around cybersecurity messages. So if you think of a phishing or spear phishing message when somebody tries to send you an email and get information out of you, the people that have worked in the cybersecurity field and in specifically in the research, academic research, they assume that you think about these messages deeply. That you say, okay, this is a phishing message, I'll give my credentials. That's not the case. The case is that you have an automatic heuristic of how you deal with the spear phishing message. You look at it and you hopefully say, this doesn't look right, and you disregard it. But what happens sometimes is you catch people that are busy, they're overloaded, they're processing too much information, it looks legitimate enough, and they end up clicking on a spear phishing link and give over their credentials on accident, and then all of a sudden realize that they've done something wrong, and maybe at that point it's too late to change the password or to come back to it. So there's a lot of automatic processing of how our brain interacts with cybersecurity, and it's important that we start focusing more on that in the research literature and in society. Okay, so one of the main things I want to leave you with in this talk is the question should not actually be what the question's been for the last 20 years, which are what are the benefits, what benefits do technology provide for us in terms of business and society? That's a question that people have been answering for a while. The question needs to be, how do we best leverage the technology to make business and society more connected, more grounded, more productive, more compassionate, and happier? So those are what we need to be thinking about, and that's a more balanced way of approaching it. There's always going to be the increased productivity, things like that technology can afford to us, but we also need to think about situations where they might draw back some of the benefits or productivity that we've gained as well. So on that note, I'd like to say mahalo or thank you for coming to the talk and listening, and we'll open it up for Q&A.